So some questions over the last couple of months. Um, is it not normal to not be able to pinpoint your values with DPDR? I can't even really answer questions about myself. Yeah, I think with depersonalization disorder, we'll often lose our emotional connection to things like values and preferences and decisions. And it's really one of these things where the simple answer is you have to practice choosing again, like a muscle. So you just take your best guess, choose what your values were before DPDR and just go back to them. It might feel a bit like fake it till you make it, but it's not faking it because these are things that have been important to you. It's just you're disconnected from them, so you're not faking anything, but it will feel a little bit like you're going through the motions, but it's like a muscle that the more, it's a bit like you've got an injury and you're very good at tennis and you know your swing, but because of the injury, you've sort of lost that. Well, trying to reclaim your tennis shot is not faking it. It's trying to reconnect with what you could do before. And you have to sort of practice just moving through the pain and repetition, repetition, and eventually the injury will recover and you'll feel like your tennis shot is back to normal. And it might even be stronger than normal, if we really recover well. So the same thing here. And then following up with DPDR, that's depersonalization, derealization disorder. So this is when we feel detached and unreal from our sense of self. We feel disconnected and unable to connect with the external world. And it has a range of intensities and it can be transient or it can be a chronic sort of experience. Um, it's been months or years. Okay, you can experience it for longer periods of time. In my opinion, and all the clients I've worked with, this is where we become hyper aware on this, and we basically re-trigger the sort of trauma threat response that's been activated in our body. It doesn't mean DPDR always comes from trauma, but it's like a dissociative process that's part of our trauma neurobiology, coping with intense sufferings. It's like it gets switched on sometimes by trauma, sometimes by other things, burnout, depletion, drug experiences, high stress, all kinds of things. And then the being focused on it kind of keeps it in a loop and worrying about it, ruminating about it, checking, monitoring, starting to avoid stuff because of it. That all keeps this system going. Now, listening to this, there may be people out there that feel they're not doing any of that. Okay, there could be biological versions of it that we're still learning to understand and research. But I personally haven't worked with anyone or met anyone where there isn't a degree of hyper awareness, checking, monitoring, struggling with it, non-acceptance that's fueling it. So, trying to switch that around to acceptance, external focus, connected with values and goals, reducing compulsions about the DPDR and compulsions about avoidance because of it. And it's hard, it's very difficult. I've experienced a lot of it across my life. It's not an easy thing to do, but you certainly can gradually start to do that. I'm scared thinking that I cannot love or that I don't have an authentic self. My OCD latches onto it and it's telling me I'm a sociopath for feeling numb. I don't know if it's true. Well, there could be some reassurance seeking in this, so be careful of reassurance seeking because that can be a compulsion to try and make ourselves feel better, but it actually reinforces the OCD processes in DPDR and really disempowers us. The reality is, people can feel numb all the time, and lots of people do. It's a common emotional response. Sociopaths don't feel emotionally numb in a negative, aversive way. They might lack empathy and they might have higher aggression and other emotions and less anxiety and fear, but it's a very different thing. Now, don't ruminate on that. Don't go over that. Don't reassure yourself with that. Instead, we're trying to normalize the experience of emotional numbness and then trying to accept that and connect with the actions of love, connect with the actions of what your authentic self was before. And we don't even need to get too complicated about authentic self, just simple choices, simple things you used to do, things that you think are healthy if you do some research on mental health and human well-being, just start practicing stuff. The more you do it, the more you get the attention off the DPDR, the less will reinforce it, and the more we'll start to move into a place where um, we're not focused on the pain, and so the pain goes into the background and other experiences start to come to the foreground again. Um, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that there can be feelings under numbness. Sometimes for some people, sometimes you feel very emotionally numb. It's not literal numbness because you're not anesthetized. It's like there's a dull, achy, painful, vague, numb, various flavors of it. And sometimes when people focus on it, you can feel the hints of sadness under it or the other emotions. But we don't need to chase that. It's just if that comes forward as you begin to accept the numbness. Feels like there is care and love, but just under a block. Yeah, exactly. That could be there as well. It could be that your system's protecting you from being caring and loving, and there could be reasons for that, ranging from people have let you down in the past and there's been trauma or it's not been safe to care and love, or that you really want to care and love, and then OCD is latching onto that and worrying about it and sort of numbing you out. So the key thing is choosing the actions of care and the actions of love. I feel sadness, numbness, anxiety, panic due to the loss of connection or fear of not being able to love. Yeah, let yourself have some sadness at times. We all need that. I just cried in the shower this morning for no strong reason other than that sadness came up and I allowed it, I accepted it, let it be there and felt it and it passed. And, I think it's important to be able to feel our emotions and to accept them, and that can be a thing that helps with DPDR for some people. Um, it's almost like very, very deep down, I know I'm able to love. Yeah, so actions of love, not the feeling of love, actions of love. I know I am good. Yeah, actions of goodness. But there's a block. Yeah, the block could be the rumination, the excessive hyper awareness on feelings, checking feelings, worrying about feelings. We need to just accept that right now I'm numb. And I would argue that it's more loving to do the actions of love when you're numb. It's easy to do them when you feel a deep sense of joy, love, and connection. Like with my kids, it's easy to be loving when your heart's exploding with warmth and you just love being around the little guys. But it's much harder to be loving when you're tired and burnout and exhausted and you're not feeling much other than tiredness and exhaustion. But I would say that's actually more loving because it's harder to do that in that state. So, the actions of love are key. Yeah, I see what I'm doing wrong. I would follow the line of questioning. I would be scared if not feeling emotion, and then it would spiral again. Yeah, so checking, worrying, ruminating about emotion is really one of the big issues. And a lot of people have this in OCD, and just trying to accept emotion or non-emotion. And, you can't just do that overnight. You have to train and practice and develop that skill. It's not easy to do, but you can build it up over time. Could you point to any ACT tools for decision making or any of your relevant videos? Yeah, I would say values-based problem solving and action planning are some of the key decision making tools from ACT. And then all the diffusion skills for the rumination when we're in analysis paralysis with decision making, and all the emotional acceptance tools when we're dealing with the emotional pain of having to make a decision, having to sit with uncertainty, having to accept that as I open one door, I close others. So, yeah, values-based problem solving, diffusion practices, acceptance practice would be really helpful. Yeah, someone talking about real event, false memory, getting so convoluted. Yeah, it can get very complicated with our minds, doing lots of mental compulsions, getting very confused. and shame plays a huge role yet. So self-compassion is such a key thing to cultivate. And it's really an exposure with real event. Doing compassion practice is an exposure. I also have a trauma history, yet trauma can really tangle up in all of that. So we want to be compassionate for trauma and really working with a therapist if we're very overwhelmed with that combination. Um, Someone commented on the OCD and suicidality video. Thanks, Chrissy and Johnny. I'm going through this right now. We'll hang in there. Definitely reach out for support. Make sure you're working with a therapist. Make sure you talk to your friends, family, anyone supportive. If there aren't supportive people, get involved with mental health charities. Um, Keep going. You know, your mind will lie to you that this will go on forever. I can't handle it, and there's nothing I can do. And actually, it won't go on forever. Even severe depression will fluctuate up and down. A lot of depression just shifts on its own. You can tolerate it, you can get through tough stuff. All humans can, and the more you use skills, the easier it's going to be to get through it. And the things you can do are the psychological skills and the actions and the connection to people. So there are always things you can do that will make it better over time. So do not listen to your brain and keep going and get support, get help. Um, on the What If I Believe My Existential OCD video. So amazing video. That's great. Lovely to hear this is helping people. Ticks so many boxes for me as a scientist. I've been stuck in this cycle. When I stop ruminating on these topics, I get this sense of guilt, like I gave up on something, or I was close to a very useful theory, or it's my job to figure it out. Yeah, and actually, isn't it funny that scientists in other areas, yes, you can become obsessive about research, but a lot of people are not going to feel that same guilt on other topics. They're going to be able to put something down. They might feel a strong desire to solve something, but then they can put it down and go and do their hobbies or other interests as long as OCD hasn't gotten into the scientific process. So yeah, there's a clue that this has been driven by the emotion of OCD, and we need to learn to accept that felt sense of guilt and that discomfort at not solving this. And that's part of the resistance. The mind will draw us back in by generating these strong emotions or lack of emotion, numbness to try and get us to solve it. And the reality is that if you're a scientist and if you're a philosopher, okay, you can be researching these topics and studying them, but we have to be able to put them down. And probably most people watching these videos are not philosophers or scientists, and it's really disrupting them enjoying a fulfilling life. So we might want to put it down altogether and have radical acceptance that I'm not the person to solve this. It hasn't been solved yet, and I need to accept these difficult thoughts and feelings, resist the urge to ruminate and solve them, and instead put all my thinking and attention into what am I going to do today? What am I going to do next? And what will matter to me? When I come back to it, it's just I get more pain and very little, if any, realizations. Exactly, we just loop around the same old stuff, not solving anything. Sometimes people do flip to they think they've solved it, and they use various philosophical arguments or their own perspective, and they think they have solved this and got certainty, and that's because OCD doesn't like to live in the uncertainty. It often will flip to I'd rather a depressive certainty than to exist in this destabilizing sense of uncertainty. And so the real antidote is learning to accept the emotions of uncertainty and the feeling of doubt and that strong itch to solve it, and learn that actually you don't need to solve it. And your mind will struggle and resist that and try and pull you back in. But if you give it long enough and you really don't, and you do some exposure and response prevention, and you develop your ACT skills and you get better and better at that, eventually your brain will get the message, this isn't something I have to solve. and things will get better. And for me, my brain doesn't lock onto it anyway, like it used to, I'd loop over it over and over and over. You'll always get the odd existential thought. It's like not like I don't get any existential thoughts, but I just don't get locked into them unless I want to have a think about them, and it's fun and enjoyable. So really, we have to teach our brain what it needs to solve and what it doesn't. What about mental urges? Yeah, you can have an urge to do a cognitive process like analysis or rumination. It's often very quick and subtle, and it's almost like you feel your energy going up into your head or something to think about it. So sometimes it's very quick and you can't catch it, but if you can catch it, then yes, urge surf that. I have the mental urge to repeat a certain sound. Okay, so that's an urge to do a behavior in the sense that it's repeating a sound in our head. So, you can have this as a very much OCD compulsive behavior, and we have to sort of urge surf it. You can also have it as a tic or a sort of Tourettic type OCD, where it's like you get a bit of relief when you repeat the certain sound in your head, but ultimately it keeps the cycle going. So we have to learn, how do I tolerate and accept the uncomfortable feeling driving it? And how do I potentially put more adaptive behaviors in, things I could do instead of that? So, especially if someone's neurodivergent, can I find a type of stimming behavior in autism that is soothing but is able to, for me to do it without putting myself at risk of being taken out of a work scenario or something like that. Can I switch the supported behavior to be something, like circling my finger and thumb, which I can do and listen, or something like that. So if it's OCD, if it's purely OCD, it won't really last in the long run. We'll feel the strong urge to say the sound, but it will just keep going, and we just have to keep doing it, and it really diminishes in the relief it provides. And in which case, we want to urge surf that. So learn to catch it, learn to, literally catch the impulse or urge to say this thing in our mind, and instead put our attention onto life and what we value. If it's more like a tick, or it's more like a stim, then okay, we have to just assess how workable it is, and if it is workable, we can keep doing it, i.e., doesn't cause any distress or difficulty in our life, and actually it feels supportive and helpful, then might not be the end of the world. But yeah, it's harder. Could be harder to do this. I mean, it's not thought suppression in the sense that like we are actively doing it, so we can let it go. If it's an intrusive sound, then that's something we just need to let be there and not do it. And if you can't tell the difference, then just practice diffusion, practice the act mindfulness skills, work with the therapist over time. It will become clearer what is an automatic sound or what is an actual, repetition of sound, which could be done to, discharge and get rid of a feeling, or it could be done for some form of reassurance or some form of check-in. It might be testing and checking, is that sound still there? And, so working with a therapist if it's tough. Although the video is good, the claim about evolving for solely survivalistic purposes that somehow playing into uncertainty is not certain either, and that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to get into philosophical debates on this channel because that's not the purpose of it. If you have an issue with any of my philosophical assumptions, then you're very welcome to just not follow it, the videos, or not engage with them. If it doesn't land with you, then go elsewhere to things that are philosophically landing with you, or where you can debate philosophy, where people want to do that. And, that might be part of the fun of following certain channels. But for me, I'm only interested in what's helpful for people's mental health. And I'm certainly not going to get into long, protracted philosophical debates on anything because I just don't think it's helpful. And actually, from an OCD perspective, I would argue that is mental compulsion. So, obviously people can have different views on evolution, and it's not like everyone has to subscribe to evolution to work on OCD recovery. There are people with certain religious beliefs or other things where they might view it very differently, theologically very differently. So that's fine. You can discount anything I say that doesn't line up with your religion. And the main thing is that just we have tricky brains, whether that's from evolution or that's another route. We have tricky brains, and we have to learn um, how to manage our brains and how to use our attention and our behavior to be more helpful. So I don't think I'll go too deep into this one, just because I don't want to start debating theology and evolution. That's for somewhere else to do that. Um, Someone's made a small suggestion, write up or show the question in the video. Thanks. Yeah, I'm always open to feedback, and I'll try and take that on. My technical skills are not brilliant, and I, unfortunately don't have a lot of time to get better and better at this sort of stuff. So some of my video content and ways of doing stuff is the best I can do within the time available. But suggestions are gratefully received. Yeah, decision making has been big for me and has probably prevented me from moving forward in my life at different points. Yeah, I've found for some people that it can be really good to start with small decisions and get really good at making them. And once you're good at them, okay, let's start making some of the bigger decisions. And, we've got to do some degree of um, problem solving and action planning with big decisions. But in some ways it is the same, and a lot of big decisions seem so big, but in reality in 10 years time they're not as big as they felt. And actually there are many paths to a happy and meaningful life, and we often overestimate like what one single part of life will do for happiness versus just working on happiness across different areas of life. So trying to just get better at the muscle of decision making really is key. Instead of fighting and avoiding emotions, get rid of emotions. Sir, currently I am allowing my emotions to be whatever and accepting them. Great, let them be. But in this process, its intensity gets heavy, and I'm getting overwhelmed so much that there's no mental capacity left to do anything. And this is going for so many days. I'm kind of getting absorbed or getting immersed in the intensity of the emotion. So yeah, there could be, rather than acceptance, there could be struggle there. So rather than solely focusing and accepting the emotion, we also want to then engage out into the world. Because, if I accept my bookshelf over here on the right, I don't stare and analyze and focus on it all day. I acknowledge it, and then I focus here on the video and I let it be there. And if it comes into my attention, fine. But ultimately, I'm focused and engaged in what I'm doing. So there might be, more on the engagement. Also, dropping anchor for overwhelm is my way of formulating an approach if we're getting very overwhelmed with acceptance and diffusion and some of the ACT tools. That's something I've learned from Russ Harris. He talks about this sort of adaptation to drop an anchor if you are feeling overwhelmed. And dialectical behavior therapy has a lot of ideas as well. If you are getting overwhelmed, we're trying to turn towards an emotion. I mean, behavior really is our greatest asset when we're getting overwhelmed by our emotions. So just getting good at doing things, even with these intense emotions. If you have to do it slower, so be it. Be compassionate, take your time, and just get better at that. What skills should I use? Do I need emotion regulation? Yeah, I think about more behavior regulation than emotion regulation. I mean, emotions can regulate themselves to some degree if we don't hyper focus and we don't stir them up with rumination and thinking. But to some degree, I've never experienced predictable emotional regulation myself. I found some emotion regulation tools might have worked in lower levels of activation, but the higher the activation went, breathing, somatic techniques, even some of the DBT techniques, the sort of paced breathing and intense exercise and temperature and progressive relaxation, things like this. I never found them as reliable, predictable, switches on my emotions. But I did find some of them as useful anchors to help carry me through a difficult emotion. So I sort of view emotion regulation more like that. Like they can be tools to help with acceptance, but we can't try and control our emotions with them, in my opinion, but we can regulate our behavior. So again, regulating where I put my attention, what I do with my arms, legs, mouth, what I say and do in the world. That's the bit to regulate. I suffer from existential OCD. I'm in therapy. I know the method to apply and I'm managing until now to live my life. Well done. That is a big achievement in itself. However, my main issues that I'm being told to engage in life, I feel like I'm following a manual of being human, i.e., there's probably no emotional resonance with it. It's like I know how to eat, talk, cook, shower, but it doesn't feel natural at all. I'm so scared to lose the ability to know how to live. Well, there's a bit of a core fear there since everything is so abstract to me, like existence is so abstract, so I can flow in it. Please, do you have any advice? I mean, to some extent, just keep doing it and see that, this feels false or it doesn't feel natural is a resistance, so diffuse that thought and keep doing things anyway. And, make sure you're not checking and hyper focused on emotion and how things feel. And, over time, you'll feel connected and get engaged as you get the rumination down further. You'll start to lose yourself in experiences again, and things will feel emotionally resonant for you again. But unfortunately, we have to learn to move through this difficult phase and accept it and not be pulled back into the OCD cycle by, this doesn't feel real or natural. So I think you're doing great by the sound of it. Keep going, keep working with your therapist and stay determined. The fact I can't be the person I've naturally been has detached me from socializing. Well, you just try that. You won't be exactly the person you want to be, but you just try that, which otherwise I was very much due to my hyper awareness, my thoughts and my behavior are different suggestions. Yeah, you just try the best you can to reconnect with who you were and the types of things you would say and do and focus on and the actions in the world. And, you build up plans to help that. Sometimes we're very much judging ourselves and we think these symptoms are more obvious to people than they are. Some severe cases I've worked with people where, thinking, talking, behavior is impeded, but even then, people are often communicating much better than they think they are, even when there are sort of delays and it is difficult. A lot of us have delays in our thinking and talking, and I had that even before struggling with hyper awareness and depersonalization, things like that. So, just being compassionate, try to do the best you can, see it as a practice that you're getting back to. Like the tennis analogy earlier, we're just hitting the shots. It may not feel right to begin with, but the more you do it, the more the injury recovers, the more you get back to where you were. Um, let's say you know what you've done and don't analyze it, really do, but you do self-punish and seek reassurance as well as live in fear. Would that be considered real event OCD? Yes, those are compulsions that go with real event. Certainly, self-punishment, reassurance seeking, and sort of hyper-awareness of the fear are all things. So yeah, try and apply the recovery skills on that. Throughout the day, I'm very aware of myself, my body, and my thoughts, like I'm aware of my awareness. In general, I notice my existence, the boundaries of my body, where and how my thoughts arise or why they don't arise. So this is sort of hyper awareness on internal state, on thoughts, feelings, body, proprioception, all things that we can get hyper focused on, hyper awareness, OCD on. or I feel trapped in my mind and body accompanied by a thought, and the intense panic and helplessness triggered by that thought. So that could be just the hyper-awareness of thinking generally creating panic, or it could be the content of the thoughts if there's disturbing OCD thoughts. Because there's nothing I can do about this. I don't even know why it bothers me so much. Well, it's probably, either the fear of the content of the thoughts, the fear of being hyper aware, feeling out of control, distracted, life being ruined, fear of where thoughts could go. Are they going to go somewhere difficult? Perhaps a link to mental health and fear of going insane, so to speak, and people often have that kind of worry with it. Um, Obviously, insane is not a great terminology. It's like really people are afraid of more severe mental health difficulties, and it could be other things as well, but it's really, that kind of hyper awareness. And you could ask yourself, like, why is this bad? If I'm aware and in this state, why is this bad? And it might be just panic, where it kind of, that started to trigger panic, and then it's more about, I want to avoid the panic and the anxiety because there's nothing I can do about this. And I don't even know why it bothers me so much. I've been experiencing this for 3 months. It's a process triggered by generalized anxiety disorders. So, generalized anxiety disorder, often characterized by sort of life worries and anxious thoughts about life. But, sometimes people talk about high levels of physiological anxiety, and that's what they mean by generalized anxiety disorder. So, you can certainly have that heightened physiological anxiety and then get hyper focused on those symptoms and then get into a difficult feedback loop where it's like the threat system of our brain, rather than going out, has turned in onto the emotion and then it's amplifying it. Should I do meditation or mindfulness exercise? I used to do them before, or would this trigger me even more? What kind of approach would you suggest? Well, my approach to sort of hyper awareness and depersonalization and things like this is, a combination of exposure and response prevention therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy with some compassion focused therapy as well. Um, I would say typically when people are so internally focused and monitoring and checking internal states, actually to do mindfulness, it might be a bit too tricky to do that and not actually get even more internal focus. So I would say more practicing act skills actively in life rather than sitting and meditating or doing mindfulness. So you could look at dropping anchor for overwhelm. You could look at the OCD skills playlist. You could, make the exposures more about going back into life, even with this hyper awareness state, trying to do the things you value again more fully. And then you could reclaim mindfulness and meditation down the line when you feel more confident that you're not going to just become even more internally focused and checking and ruminating and worrying about what you're feeling. So, typically that might look like dropping anchor for overwhelm, behavioral activation. So, building up patterns of behavior each day that are supportive to your well-being, and then uh, increasing the sort of exposure aspects of doing anything you've avoided, and potentially then even doing exposure to things that are triggering of the hyper awareness. And then, then when you feel skilled at all of that stuff, then meditation should feel something you could do again. But I think a lot of people, if you meditate intensively and if you're doing that outside the context of spirituality, there's you're doing it for a reason. So sometimes it can become an avoidance behavior. I'm meditating so hard to try and get rid of my anxiety or my intrusive thoughts, certainly what I did in the past. So in a way, it's like you just need a bit of mindfulness really to build up the skills, and then you better to go out and live your life, and unless you're very spiritual and you wanted to pursue it as a spiritual practice. Um, Someone said on the OCD anxiety and intimacy video, I just can't have sex. Groinals kidnapped my attraction. My girlfriend left me because she believed I was cheating on her because I didn't have sex. I'm really sorry to hear that. Obviously, OCD can really interfere with relationships. This is hell, but somehow I'll find a way. I just feel so tired and frustrated. It is very difficult. I think I talked to someone earlier on about this sort of gradual exposure, treating intimacy, treating your sort of personal, intimate world, masturbation, things like that, as a type of exposure where we're trying to, reduce the mental compulsions, reduce the kind of check-in, and if intrusive thoughts are coming up, learn to diffuse and let them be there without giving them all the attention and without ruminating about them, and instead engage in the process of what you're doing. So engage on the person you're with or thinking about and the situation you're in, and you can build that up. You can start with just thinking about these topics again, and then as intrusive thoughts come in, diffuse and come back to thinking about the topic. Then you could, if you have a partner, you could sort of gradually do some physical touch and massage and contact, and then build all the way up in a gradual way towards full sex again. And I guess people get very messed up with intrusive thoughts coming in at the point of intimacy and even orgasm. That can be a big trigger for people. And so we've got to learn that actually there's nothing special about intimacy in terms of intrusive thoughts. If you have an intrusive thought while you eat your lunch, if you have intrusive thought at work, if you have intrusive thought when you're playing with your family, if you have an intrusive thought while you're studying for an exam, if you have an intrusive thought during sex and intimacy, it's all the same. It's intrusive thoughts. So we're going to learn to diffuse, which means to be able to mindfully step back and detach, and then, keep our engaged focus on our values. So the actual thing we're enjoying and focused on. And that can take a lot of practice, but hopefully you can regain and recover that. The groinal is what's called non-concordant arousal. So it comes in different shapes and forms, but it is the body either getting very anxious and getting internally focused on our, the places we normally feel aroused in the body, groinal, but it can also be the heart and chest and where you might feel sort of love and attraction, the head, other parts of your body, other, erogenous zones and things like that. People have this in different places, but it's really like a hyper awareness, a worry, a checking. I also think it shows up as an intrusive thought. So intrusive thoughts can be images, words, emotions, impulses, and body sensations. And it's like the body is, it's like you're at the edge of a tall building, your body generates a sensation like you're going to jump off in order to get you to back away. Well, you're around threats and triggers, and your body generates non-concordant arousal, which then gets you to back away and avoid. Or it can be just that our brain has a simple level, and if you are thinking about sexual content of any type, the work of Emily Nagoski shows that people can have non-concordant arousal just because the brain works in simple associations. Just like, if you think of a certain food group, you can start to salivate it. Even potentially if you don't even like the food group, you might get a biological response. I don't like mushrooms, but if I thought about them with garlic oil, garlic butter, and things like that, I might start to salivate, even though I don't like mushrooms. So the point is, the more you hyper focus on this, the more you ruminate, the more you worry, the more you analyze, the more you test. Testing is a big no-no compulsion. It would just confuse you and get you even more detached from who you are and what you really want. So, all those compulsions are the thing that make the groinal so confusing. You have to treat it like a chronic pain or like tinnitus or like something like that, which is just your body misfiring, and it doesn't need any attention. The more you accept and don't hyper focus on it, the more the tinnitus or chronic pain will go into the background. The same with this. So it's a very difficult thing for people with taboo OCD and the sort of sexual intrusive thoughts. But people have it in all OCD. People have it in harm. They'll sort of feel impulses, or they'll feel what they imagine insanity feels like, or feeling, impulsive and like you're going to hurt someone. They'll sort of imagine it. But again, it's all just hyper focus on our internal world with anxiety, with doubt, and it really messes people up. And sometimes it's also depression as well in there, as well as the anxiety and doubt. A video about synchronicity OCD, if there's ever such a thing. Yeah, magical thinking will have a lot of synchronicity within it. And the person says, I keep seeing the numbers 666, 67, 66, or 67 if you're in the UK, you'll know that lots of teenagers and kids are seeing the numbers 67 everywhere and repeating them at the time of video. Basically, our brain is a pattern detecting system and it's trying to make predictions, spot patterns, and basically keep us alive and help us gain resources and help us gain social status, and it's a something to protect us. And so it will try to spot patterns, and sometimes it will see patterns that aren't there. So the classic example is you get a new car and suddenly you see that model of car everywhere and you hadn't noticed it at all prior to getting the car. So it's like selection bias. It's like our mind will notice these patterns, and it will hyper focus on them. And actually, numbers are everywhere. So people with magical thinking will see numbers all the time. And actually, statistical probability is we do have coincidence in our life, but it doesn't mean it means anything. It just means you have enough data points, enough things coming in. Eventually, you're going to have a number of um, sort of seemingly synchronicical, I can't, synchronicity in your life. Yes, some people have a spiritual view here, and again, I'm not questioning anyone's spiritual view, and if you sort of believe in synchronicity and manifesting and things like that, the main point there then is to take the highest part of the teaching, which is what's in my heart and what I care about is more important than, you know, sort of negative thoughts and pulling in negative stuff. It's more about how much love, connection, and sort of positive emotion and energy I put into the world. So I have worked with clients where they hold those beliefs strongly, and I'm not going to question anyone's spiritual beliefs, but we do have to think about how they interact with OCD and how we can apply spiritual teachings that actually reinforce recovery methods. But leaving that aside, most people will be aware that, there isn't synchronicity, there is just pattern detection and biases, and you can prime people to then see more of things in the environment. They've done all these psychological studies, so it can feel like there's a lot of synchronicity, but really it's all part of magical thinking typically. And magical thinking is like, oh, if I see these numbers, I've got to cancel them out, or if I see these words, I've got to cancel them out. And actually, I have clients with all different sets of numbers are their OCD numbers, and each person will see more of that number because of that bias. So the other client won't see say with this example, the 6 7, if someone's numbers weren't 6 6 6 or 6 7, if their numbers were 4 or 8 or something else, well, they're going to see 4 and 8 all the time everywhere, whereas someone else will see 6 6 6. And it's just because of your bias in your attentional system. Um, so the antidote is we have to see that, either we disempower the OCD from believing that it can predict reality and challenge it gradually and push back and start to reclaim your life, because it'll say it's protecting your future, but really OCD is the thing that makes your future go wrong and shuts down your life. So we have to be courageous, brave, and challenge it, and either do that gradually, or sometimes you can do it in bigger steps if you're ready to do that. And try to reduce the amount we're thinking, ruminating, doing the thought replacement, doing the magical thinking rituals, and instead get engaged in your life. And the people it's saying magical thinking is protecting, well, go out there and connect with those people. That's the only way you can help those people in the world. You can't do it by saying numbers and patterns and sequences. There's also this thing where greater times of uncertainty, humans will be more superstitious. So post Second World War, you saw a lot more superstitious conspiracy behavior. or conspiracy story type behavior. And it's like we're trying to grab hold of things we can control when we feel out of control. And so to some degree have to accept that we don't have full control and there is uncertainty in the universe and we don't know which way it's going. But all we can do is focus on living our life. Um, I'm experiencing ongoing anxiety, and it isn't just racing thoughts. It's more like hyper awareness of my internal state. Yeah, a lot of people will have that. It's not always thoughts. It can be emotions and sensations and um, things within the body, more than thoughts, or it can be both, or it can be impulse, it can be perception, strange things in how you're seeing the world and hearing, and basically anxiety can show up in all your body systems and how you experience the world. Um, I notice my thoughts and body sensations constantly. So there's hyper awareness. I get stuck analyzing whether I feel right. So there's sort of judging, analyzing the feelings, checking feelings, monitoring feelings. This creates tension, head, body tightness, and a blank or detached feeling. Yeah. So the hyper awareness creates the things we're afraid of. But yeah, we have to try and accept it, trying to accept it, but by accepting it, I feel like I'm avoiding it and prolonging it. Yeah, I think that's the resistance. We have to accept it, and like a type of chronic pain, the more we struggle, the more we monitor, the more we resent something, the more it'll get louder in our awareness. Whereas if we can really accept the presence of the pain and live our life more fully, we'll get the best symptom profile possible over time. So the more you can accept, the better. But it's not like you just decide to accept. You have to train acceptance over time, and you can look at the recommendations on the channel for practices. Um, Hey, I have a question. I suffer from existential OCD and I'm basically constantly triggered. Yeah, I was like that. Gets called priming sometimes, where it's like just everything triggers you and even thoughts and just perception and things become kind of linked up with the anxiety and the depression and things. I literally do not see how I can ever find meaning and peace in life again after the thoughts my brain has had. Yeah, well, we got to get back to there's just uncertainty and you can choose meaning by choice. You can choose, okay, my goals are X, Y, and Z, my values in my family life, in my work life, in my play, in my health. These are my values, and you can freely choose them. You don't need to argue with the philosophical gods about whether it's meaningful or not. We keep it very simple and make the choices, and then everything that resists is resistance. And you have to get better at detaching from that. It feels like my brain went to a place it wasn't supposed to go. Yeah, it can very much feel like that with existential OCD. And now I can't unlearn what I saw. But that's true with all OCD. OCD will feel like you realize something that is terrifying and you can't unsee it. But actually, your brain can learn to not judge something as so salient and important, and then it will go back to a question that doesn't need to be solved. But you have to work on your recovery. I'm utterly desperate and hopeless. I think when you feel desperate and hopeless, the key is to really work with a therapist or work with a recovery community and try to get some support with that. And explore practices on this channel, the OCD skills playlist. Try and the practice is the key. You won't recover by just reading and watching videos and studying and doing those kind of solving compulsions. We'll recover by learning to accept the presence of these difficult thoughts and feelings and live in your life. And ACT has a lot of skills: dropping anchor, diffusion, acceptance, urge surfing, then into values-based exposure, dipping in and out the stream, self-compassion. Really practice all these things and apply them to it, and then see whether it feels so desperate and hopeless after that. But you can do it. You have to work hard at recovery. I had to commit, minimum half an hour a day of targeted practice. And then many days I was doing far more than that, and then doing exposure and skills all day long. And if you do that, you can get better for sure. Anyone can, but it takes a lot of hard work and practice. Please help. I have panic attacks of what is my body? What am I seeing and who am I? Yeah, scary existential thoughts. What is my brain? Who thinks this thought and what is it thinking? It's like I'm not thinking when I think about it. Yeah, we just get so hyper focused on thinking it all becomes very bizarre and weird. Just like if I hyper focus on my finger long enough, it'll start to look weird and feel weird, and I won't be able to judge depth and perception. My eyes might start to feel odd. The same thing is happening with our thoughts. So we need to get out of the way of that with training and practice and get more engaged in life again, and then it will return to feeling more how it was before. How can I get out of it when I'm afraid of who I am and what I'm seeing? Yeah, you've got to be courageous here and just choose to start living your life again, pursuing goals, connecting with people, living your values, and make a plan each day and try and follow that plan. Learn the skills, learn dropping anger for overwhelm on the channel, start to learn to accept the anxiety and the DPDR, um, and try to get that focus on. You say 100% of the day, the symptoms you focus on. I watch myself. Okay, we're going to learn to mindfully step back from that and then give our attention to life and what you value and training to do that. And if you do that long enough, you will get to a much better place. Is that normal? And can I get back to life? Yep, totally normal. As you see on this channel, everyone's going through similar experiences that's reaching out with questions about existential OCD. It's very, very common. Many people going through it have to be careful about reassurance seeking and trying to reassure ourselves about normality and instead focus on what you want your life to be, what you want your normality to be and where you want to go and do. Um, have to go into the psychiatry and get drugs till the end of my life. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't generally give advice on medication. I share my own experience and I will share things from clients. And I guess, what I see in clients is I see some clients find medication really supportive and it will take a large chunk of the intensity down. Other people, it's more medium. They don't know. It might help with some stuff, but I'm not really sure with everything. And then there's a smaller subgroup of people that have adverse experiences and difficulties. And sometimes you can be a bit of all of those. I felt a bit all of those when I used medication. So you got to talk to your psychiatrist, but no one has to be on medication for OCD the rest of their life. Some people do choose to be on it a long time because they find it helpful. And until we know that there's an issue with that, then there's no shame in using medication to support you and help you. And there's nothing anti-ACT or ERP in using the recommended treatments for OCD from medication, but it's a big topic. It's difficult. In the UK, there's some good advice on the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the UK has some really good advice on adverse experiences with medications and coming off them or on them. So you could have a look on that if you're interested in medication. I think they've got some great information there now. I feel that this kind of OCD, it's talking about existential OCD, is almost a snap response to life when it gets hard. Yeah, I think some people find it's like the mind's way of avoiding goals that it think it can't achieve. So you can get kind of very nihilistic existential thoughts that are really trying to convince you to pull back on effort and energy in goals that it thinks it can't achieve. So sometimes you have to push through that and achieve those goals, go for them anyway, and bring the existential thoughts along for the ride. And when it says, oh, there's no point, there's no meaning, there's no free will, there's no this, there's no that. Okay, it's trying to get you to give up on a meaningful goal because it thinks it's too hard. It thinks you can't achieve it, or people are unreliable and it's not safe to connect and deepen your relationships. And so we have to use our skills to diffuse and connect to people anyway, or pursue goals anyway, and get better and better at doing that. And then, it'll ease off as it realizes that you are making progress. Um, Recently, I was really thinking about whether I should move to another country or not, and I was not able to make a decision. Yeah, you can have decision making OCD alongside it for a long time, and then suddenly the existential OCD kicked in and paralyzed me for 3 months. Yeah, it could be the brain's trying to push you into avoidance because it's feeling a bit afraid of these sorts of things. So you need to work on the mental compulsions, diffusing, reducing the mental compulsions, increasing the acceptance of the intrusive thoughts and the difficult feelings. You can see I got a bit of a bruise here. I was doing some archery and was keeping my arm a bit too straight, unfortunately, and I've bruised it a little bit. So that's what that is. Yeah, you need to also accept the presence of the intrusive thoughts, difficult feelings, and then be very focused in the present moment, even with difficult symptoms. If you get good at those three things, it'll all get easier, and you can pursue your goals, even if existential OCD is chattering away at you. Finally, what do you mean there is no way to bring it down by not monitoring, etc.? Yeah, I think you're talking about OCD, intense emotions, and video. And basically, that is the more you monitor and check and become hyper aware of an emotion, the more it amplifies it because it's like you put constriction on it and struggle, and then it expands. And then you also ruminate and hyper focus and think and check and analyze and resent, and all of that adds to the emotion and blows it up. So ERP is not working. No, ERP does work, but I personally think ERP works more by learning we can tolerate the distress, learning we can accept the obsessions and the difficult emotions and pursue things we value. And then through doing that type of exposure, the symptoms come down as the side effect. Feeding it through compulsions and ruminations won't feed it. Yeah, feeding it through compulsions and ruminations does feed it. Like that's what feeds the OCD is all the mental compulsions. Why am I asking it? Partly because it sounds really unmotivating and futile. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes the idea that you've got to accept the presence of symptoms first before you get better can be unmotivating and feel really tough, and people will have a lot of resistance because you'd like something that just gets rid of it or treats it more simply. But it's still an optimistic message because we're not saying symptoms don't get better. We're just saying they get better through acceptance and reduction of compulsions and engagement in life. And then, the side effect is that things get better and better, and you can live life and more fully, and you can get more resilient, and you can do more difficult things. I would say, all kinds of things in my life are better from OCD recovery. I'm a better parent, I'm better in my job, I'm more focused, I've got higher resilience, pain tolerance, distress tolerance. Things bother me less. I'm kinder to myself. I'm kinder to others. I have more joy and happiness and fun. Like lots of things improve greatly through the recovery process. So it's not unmotivating and futile. It will get better and better. There could be a bit of meta OCD and worry, and there's the kind of worry about recovery and mental health. We can get kind of fearful of depression and unhappiness and things like that. So you might have to look at like, is this resistance to the recovery process? Your mind saying, oh, that sounds awful. You won't, you've got to accept things in order to get you to avoid. But basically, it's like there are different stages. The first stage is you have to really be able to live alongside the emotions and thoughts and not be controlled by them at all, live your life fully, regardless of OCD and with great acceptance of the symptoms. And then if you truly do that, then everything will get easier. But if you're doing that and all the while you're looking over your shoulder going, has it gone yet? Has it gone yet? Has it gone yet? That will just reinforce the OCD and make it worse. So it isn't I like this message because it's real and honest. I fell for years for people promising miracle results. I went and learned all kinds of spiritual practices, personal development, lifestyle, well-being, different therapy modalities, all the therapy modalities that promise quicker results, even sort of more simplistic versions of ERP that sound like it's going to just get symptom reduction very easily. Like all of that I pursued for decades. And I love this message because it's real, it works, you can get better, but it's a realistic message. It's not like you can just get the app, you can cure OCD and have no symptoms, or that you won't ever have ups and downs in your life again with intrusive thoughts. It's like you can get much, much, much better at handling them. And in doing so, you will get the best symptom profile, in terms of it's easier to be with the thoughts. They may even go dormant, disappear completely for long periods of time. You may even reach a point where you're more like a regular person with the frequency of intrusive thoughts that a regular person has. But for many of us, we might have, more anxiety, more difficult thoughts still, but we're just able to handle it well. We have big periods of time where you don't have any of those difficult symptoms. You have more normal everyday anxiety, just the odd intrusive thoughts here and there, or at times of stress. But as soon as you start chasing like no symptoms and I don't want any intrusive thoughts, I don't want any difficult feelings, straight away OCD is going to pop back up and it's going to be intense because your brain's trying to protect you from the threat of the intrusive thought and the difficult emotion. And then it starts to monitor, it starts to think about these things all the time, starts to avoid stuff in the world that reinforces it. And all of that, you put it together and you get a relapse or, a setback. So we have to get really good at living from this place of acceptance. And then it helps with so many other difficult things in life as well. So I think it's an optimistic message because it's a real message. It's not promising, be very careful of people on the internet promising, I've got the magic supplement, I've got the magic therapy approach, I've got the magic personal development or spiritual approach, or I've got this or that. Um, if something is that effective, it is very easy to get things progressed in research. Don't believe people who say, oh, no one would want to research it. Like it's no, if you have enough case examples of people getting miracle cures from anything, it's not hard to then get, a kind of a case building study going. And then from there, if it really is that good, within no time, you can get things progress to more and more research and build up an evidence base. So I don't think it's true that there could be these miracle cures out there that then the mainstream don't want to research. People are desperate for things that will help, and certain treatment things do make their way through into evidence base. EMDR being, whatever you make of EMDR. Um, some people think it works exactly as it says, and other people feel like it's an exposure therapy with some scaffolding and some support. Whatever you make of it, it had enough of an evidence base to progress quite quickly to being, a treatment for trauma. So it's not impossible to do that. So be very skeptical of people promising, especially if they charge a lot of money. Stay very clear of it. And if their information is behind paywalls and they're not releasing their core ideas in books or videos or places like freely distributed, be very skeptical and very careful because, like me, you may spend a ton of money and travel all around the world trying to find a miracle cure and then realize at the end of that, I've got to get better at accepting anxiety and other difficulties and living my life. And I could have saved a lot of money and a lot of time if I'd known to do that. So I hope you don't fall into that trap too. Brilliant, awesome questions, and yeah, feel free to keep them coming in. I'll try to answer them when I can. I won't be able to always get to things right away, just because, like all of you, we're all busy, right? We're all juggling multiple things, and so I can't respond to everything. But I will keep trying to do these replies and keep trying to make videos in response to questions that people ask and things that are. That a lot of people are asking. I'll prioritize those sorts of things and make videos about them, and keep working hard on your recovery. Practice, practice, practice. If you are struggling, give it 3 months of really solid practice when every day you can say, yeah, I did my ACT skills, I did my ERP, I did my compassion, and see where you are at the end of those 3 months.